So this is all about building a camping pod to go on the back of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Now it sounds a bit bonkers really, and actually the reasons behind this is that we travelled across the world with Chitty, and we had a great big tent, and it was a fantastic tent. It was an Oz tent, and the beauty about it was that as soon as you took it off, literally it came up like a pram hood, and 30 seconds this tent is up, and it's fantastic. Waterproof, windproof, it's just the job, but really heavy. And actually putting it up every day for a year, putting all your camping gear in, and making the beds inflated, putting all your bedding in there, and getting all your camping gear out, your stove and so on. It was quite a chore really, and it was okay. But for a whole year, every time I went to a campsite, you'd see a camper van or a motorhome, and I was really envious. And the ones that really ticked the box were the Land Rovers that had a roof tent on the top. And it just seemed so simple. They just clipped it and it opened up, and their bedding was already in there, and it was really nice and warm and secure. And they were off the ground, and it just felt a little bit more secure really. So that was the inspiration to go and build a roof tent or a camping pod or something that would go on Chitty. Now, one of the things that has been crucial to building a camping pod on Chitty is to actually make Chitty a bit more roadworthy for the next adventure. Now, the history of Chitty is that the engine that was in Chitty is all original. The vehicle is from 1973, so we're coming up nearly 50 years old. And it was getting, we drove across the world in it, and it puffed out a lot of blood smoke. The engine was getting very, very warm. It'd gone round the clock. I'd watched it go round the clock. I don't know if that's the first time it's gone round the clock or the second time. Who knows? It only goes up to 100,000 and then it goes round again. But I have no idea the mileage. Now I did a compression test, which means actually removing the spark plugs and putting a compression tester in there, turning the engine over, and it gives you a reading and it tells you what the compression is like, and it was rubbish. And I found that when I was driving Chitty on that old engine, when you went up a hill, you were down a third, second, first gear, holding up the traffic. So it was lovely and sweet and quiet, and the bearings were good, but it was just very worn. 60 odd bhp isn't a lot for quite a heavy vehicle, an old Land Rover. They were very torquey, had a lot of pulling power, but they didn't actually have much bhp. So when you've lost quite a few horses, they've bolted and left the stable over time, it was quite a poor engine really. But it's Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and it's got to look right. It can't be something that's just a bit of a bodged affair. It's got to look good, and it's got to be in fitting with Chitty. It's got to be wood and aluminium and brass and all that quirky sort of stuff. So I thought, how can I go about making a roof tent that will not impact on the back of the car? I.e., you're not going to drill holes into the wood, you're not going to damage Chitty. It's got to be something that you can bolt on and you can take off when you're not using it, and Chitty will still look like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Granted, when it's on, it's going to change the whole dynamics of the car. It's going to look really different. I think when the cab's on, it looks like a gangster car from the 1930s. I sat down, I started to do a load of drawings and sketches and so on, and in my mind it was about having something that would open a bit like a clam really, and the sides would be waterproof fabric, and they have to be red and yellow because it's a bit of a Chitty thing, a bit of a Chitty theme really. So it was sort of pulling all those ideas together, and I didn't have much of a budget. You could spend thousands on this, so it was really a case of having a look round the garage and the workshop and round the garden and seeing what I had. And I still happen to have the old Land Rover roof from Chitty, when Chitty was a Series 3 Land Rover. I kept a few of the parts, and I always thought maybe the roof would come in handy sometime, because it is a you know, it's an aluminium roof, it's reinforced, it's quite strong. And I had this up the end of the garden. I thought, well, actually we can use that. So I went up the garden, pulled it back, and thought, how can I make this into a camping pod, or at least use it as a base? But it was really sort of, you know, off the cuff. It was making it up as I was going along, really. But the first crucial thing was we laid it down. Well, my wife and I, Carolyn, we both laid on the ground, and we measured how long we were and how wide we were. Because clearly if you're going to sleep in it, it's got to be comfortable and it's got to fit us. And fortunately, we're not very big. I'm only 5'7", she's 5'6". We're quite small frames, so it meant that actually it didn't have to be too big, because as long as we can get in it and it's comfortable, then that's okay. So we drew a thing round us as we laid on the floor. Then we cut the aluminium roof out, and we laid on top of that, and that fitted all right. That was cool. So then I sort of had to taper it. I couldn't go into a complete boat shape because obviously you've got legs and they can't really sleep like that. So I sort of tapered it to sort of follow the contours of Chitty. But taking the old engine out was incredibly stressful. I hadn't touched this engine. We've driven it across the world. It's very personal. I never wanted to change the engine because it's the heart of the car. But reconditioning it, that's fair enough because it needs to be revamped. But getting it out, it's so stressful that I didn't want to damage the car or the wings or the bonnet, and having to unbolt all the starter motor and the cylinder head and the radiator, take all these parts out before I could lift it out. And I had a friend, Andy, who came over and gave me a hand, but it was really stressful. It was like being at the birth of your first child, And then also around the garden I had an old 14-foot boat, an old GRP timber boat, and it was a very, very heavy boat, and over the years it filled with water, the bottom had rotted out, and it was a shame because it was a lovely boat, but it was so heavy to put in the water that we just didn't use it very often, and as I say, it rotted out. But the bow section, the front of the boat, was still in good order, and I thought, we're playing on a boat theme with Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, so maybe I can use a part of this to be maybe at the top of the camping pod. So that was a bit of inspiration, but it did look a bit rough, needed a little bit of work, and took myself off to Claire Lallow's in Cowes on the Isle of Wight, where I ordered some Iroko timber. Now this timber which is a bit like a teak-y substitute kind of thing, and it is used in boat building, and it's what I used on the back of Chitty in its boat tail. So I ordered a little bit more of this, wasn't too expensive, and some lumberjack glue, really, really strong stuff, and some brass screws. And I thought, whatever I do has got to be in fitting with Chitty, and it's got to, it's got to be reasonable quality, and lots of varnish to make it weatherproof, really. Over time, it was quite a poor engine, really, and it leaked a lot of oil. It burnt a lot of oil, and it guzzled fuel. I was 16 miles to the gallon, not that brilliant. I think they only did 18 when they were new, but anyway. So I needed to recondition the engine, and I found a company in North Wales called ACR Engineering, and they specialise in Series Land Rover engines. I mean, they do lots of other things as well, but this is one of their specialities, and I was very impressed with it. They take the whole engine, they completely recondition it, new piston rings, new bearings, and so on and so forth, and it comes back painted, gleaming, and I'm very, very pleased with the outcome of it. And obviously you've got more horsepower. It's back to a new lease of life, really. Now I've made the camping pod to sit on the back of Chitty, and I've had to build a frame that fits in to the rear seat, so this doesn't impact at all where on the boat tail of Chitty. It just fits inside. I've had to remove some of the inner linings and the the seats that sit in the back. But this frame sits in nice and easy, just slides in. And then down the back of Chitty, I've made some aluminium struts that bolt on behind the picnic hamper. So it's really strong. And then we've got 2 slats that run linear of the car. But whatever I did round the sides, my plan was to put this Iroko timber, so the Iroko timber round the sides, and it will be glued, and then the process is once you've glued it on there, then you screw it. But I've got to make sure that the brass screws, all the heads run in a nice line, so they're all lined up. So it's like attention to detail, really. Once I've put that on, then the next step for me was to cork it. And I've got some corking. It's basically a mastic, but it's very good mastic that they use in the marine industry, the boat industry. And you cork it. And there's a bit of a technique to this because it's so easy to mess it up because it just gets everywhere. But you get your rubber gloves on, get your overalls on, and then you use masking tape, and you put the masking tape either side of the gap. And the reason you do that is that so that the corking doesn't go into the grain of the wood. So I tend to varnish first of all, only a couple of coats on top of the Iroko timber, and that sort of seals the wood, therefore that if you miss a little bit of that corking, it won't go into the grain, and because you've got a bit of varnish you can actually wipe it off. I've got a second battery, but how can I keep that second battery charged up? I did go down the line and think about solar power, and then I came up with the idea of a wind turbine. Now with a wind turbine, I thought if it was quite small, like a portable wind turbine, I could just bolt it onto the side of the camping pod, and then wherever you were, if it was a bit windy, you get a little bit of wind, generate the battery, charge it up again. That'd be cool. Wouldn't use it all the time, but just as and when you needed it. And then I went down the line of thinking, well, that's a bit boring. Maybe it needs to be in a Chitty theme, and well, the Chitty theme is a windmill. So I thought, I'm going to make this little wind turbine into a Chitty windmill, which is a bit bonkers, but you know, it's a bit of fun. But the windmill has 4 blades, and most wind turbines, well, they've only got 3 blades. So how do you make it? So I thought, well, I'm going to have to make a wind turbine blades myself. So I cut them out of aluminium, and then I thought, how do you get that angle right to catch the wind? That's a bit of an art. You know, there's a bit of science there about how the curvature catches the wind to make that blade spin. Fortunately, in the garage I've got a propeller from an old microlight. It's a wooden timber propeller. It's lovely. So I use that as like a template. So I put the aluminium over the top, and I just bent it round that profile of the propeller, which actually it worked quite well. The next step was the interior and the side. So this is really Carolyn's side of the deal, really. She's very clever with needlework, and she's got a sewing machine and sewing and so on. And she's managed to. I made the templates out of cardboard, and then she sat down. She's actually cut them all out. She's given it a Chitty wing effect, and it was quite challenging trying to get this to go inside. So we had to make little sleeves at the top to put an aluminium batten in with some holes in, so that we could actually use that aluminium batten as a strengthener, and then screw it to the top inside of the Chitty camping pod roof.